Friday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of New Hampshire Latino News Opinion Plus, a monthly series airing on Fridays. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. Today, we're joined by Josie Pinto, the co-founder and executive director of the Reproductive Freedom Fund of New Hampshire. Welcome, Josie. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, how did you start your career in reproductive justice?
Yeah, so I went to college at UMass Amherst, and I was super lucky to have access to a great reproductive justice community out there. So in college, my major was public health and women's studies, and I got a degree in reproductive health rights and justice. So I was just really fortunate to have that option. And then also in college, I was president of the Planned Parenthood chapter on our campus. So that's how I first started. I actually came into it through sexual assault advocacy work on campus. At UMass Amherst, we had a group of survivors who were trying to fight for better policies on our campus for survivors of sexual assault. So that's kind of how I came into this work, from a really personal lens of being a survivor and just wanting to see more justice for people like us. And then eventually it led more to reproductive justice more broadly.
So this is something that you've pretty much always been passionate about from the beginning.
Yeah, I've been doing this about 8 years now.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. What inspired you to create the Reproductive Freedom Fund of New Hampshire?
Yeah, so after college, I got a job with Planned Parenthood New Hampshire Action Fund, and I moved up here from Massachusetts. Massachusetts has 3, almost 4 abortion funds, and I was pretty surprised to learn that New Hampshire didn't have a single abortion fund. And I knew that that had to be a huge need. So when I first moved to New Hampshire, I noticed that. And then after my job at Planned Parenthood wrapped up, I actually got a job at Equality Health Center, which is one of our 3 abortion providers here in the state. And since that job was more on the health center side of things, every single day it was my job to talk to patients who were scheduling their abortion. And every time that money came up, usually at least once a day, there was someone who wasn't sure how they were going to pay for their abortion. And it got really hard every day to say, you could try calling a fund in another state, but there's no guarantee they're going to help you because you're not from their state. So pretty much every day I would go home and just felt like there had to be something more that I could do. That was back in 2019. And so, yeah, back then I just decided that I was going to take it upon myself to start this organization. I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit, but I knew a lot of people who could help, and I assembled a team, and it took us about 2 years to build before we were ready to launch. But yeah, that's the inspiration, was just hearing people directly having that need and not feeling like I could send them anywhere good enough.
So what's been like one of the biggest obstacles, because it's hard to create a nonprofit organization and to build it from the ground up? I would guess that one of the biggest obstacles is funding, but what would you say it is?
Yeah, I mean, it was all really hard because as executive director, you have to learn every single piece. So there were some parts that I was pretty comfortable with. Like I said, I've been organizing for a really long time. So I think I was able to do it because I had good connections to people who knew things that I didn't know. Like my friend who was in law school was a huge help with getting our bylaws written, which was a part that I knew nothing about. So yeah, I think funding was probably the biggest obstacle. Before launching, we set a goal of raising $20,000. And it was really hard to raise that money initially because we weren't funding abortions yet. People didn't know us. And yeah, just we didn't really have the legitimacy or connections to raise that kind of money. So it took us a long time to get to that goal. By the time we launched, we actually had raised $30,000 and have raised a ton more since actually funding abortion. But yeah, the funding part took a very long time for sure.
But you were able to do it, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Roe v. Wade is the 1973 lawsuit that led to the Supreme Court establishing a constitutional right to abortion in the United States. I know that you know this, but I just want to reiterate it for the audience who might not know. And then in May of this year, a draft leaked, and that draft suggested that Roe v. Wade could be overturned, leaving individual states to decide whether they would regulate abortion or ban it altogether. What was your initial reaction when you first saw the draft?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I was as shocked as most people because, like I've said, we have been anticipating this moment. And we've known that with every new Supreme Court justice, that has kind of been the reason that they were seated on the court, especially during the Trump era. So I wasn't surprised by what it contained. I was kind of surprised by the process. This is unprecedented. We've never had a leaked draft in history come out before an actual opinion. So I think I was, pretty surprised by that. And it was, quite heartwarming to see how much support and attention our organization got essentially overnight. We really haven't been on a ton of people's radar. And now all of a sudden, I think a lot more people know about us and know about our work. So in some ways, I think it's been positive for exposure, but obviously it confirms what we've long expected. And that's really hard news, especially for half the country, which is going to ban or restrict abortion overnight when this comes out.
And you said it's been long expected, and I was going to ask you about that because I read your op-ed that you published in the Boston Globe.
Yeah.
And you said those of us fighting for reproductive rights have long known that Roe v. Wade will eventually fall and have been preparing for that reality. Can you kind of explain that?
Sure. So, the National Network of Abortion Funds, which is kind of the umbrella in which our organization exists under, there's about 80 other abortion funds across the country that exist under that. That was started over 20 years ago by Black women who knew that this day was likely going to come. So, pretty much, particularly Black women, I would say, have known that this is something that we should expect and prepare for, because the signs have been there for a really long time. So, like I said before, when seating Kavanaugh and Amy Barrett and certain people to the Supreme Court, one of the first things that they were asked about was their stance on abortion. And they were very intentionally seated on that court because of how they felt about abortion. So, while the left has been organizing on a ton of different issues, rightfully so, abortion has kind of been the right's whole main focus. And they've been seating judges and, all kinds of people in all kinds of offices across the country based on abortion views. So even though 70% of our country supports abortion access, people in power, have been seated in positions intentionally because of their stance on abortion. So, yeah, I think that there are certain communities that have been expecting and preparing for this, low income, marginalized communities. And I think the shock is more coming from wealthy white communities that maybe this wasn't so much on their radar.
So, how is your organization preparing for the potential overturn now?
Yeah. So right now, we've mostly just been funding New Hampshire residents. So I think the biggest shift is we're preparing to see a lot more out of state people traveling to New Hampshire for an abortion. So while that number can't be predicted, we're looking at how we can scale up our funding to help cover those patients. So that's likely going to look at looking at other abortion funds. So if someone's, for example, comes up here from Texas, we would try to coordinate with Texas abortion funds, and maybe we would fund half of their procedure and work with other funds to get them the funding they need. So we're expecting to pay for about half the cost of people coming from out of state, in addition to the full cost for all New Hampshire residents, which is what we've been doing currently.
So it goes back to funding and also collaborating with other like-minded people.
Yeah. The other thing we're trying to do is offer more than just abortion support, because we know that the direct cost of the abortion isn't the only barrier. So we have a rides network right now where we can get patients to and from their appointments, and that's been absolutely critical. A lot of people don't have a ride because if you're getting an abortion, you can't drive yourself because of the medications you're on. So that's one other concrete way we're stepping up our support. And over time, we want to look into things like booking hotel rooms for people and just kind of all the other needs that arise when actually getting to and from your appointment, as well as the appointment itself.
Yeah, so there's so much that goes into it that people don't really realize.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking through your Instagram or your organization's Instagram page, and there was a post that said abortion bans are racist, and I really want to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to. We say that because abortion bans in particular affect marginalized communities the most. So, there's a phrase that many people say, which is just kind of that wealthy white women have always had access to abortion and will always be able to access abortion. So when we say abortion bans are racist, it's because the people that are most affected by them are young people, people of color, low income people, people who use drugs, like all sorts of marginalized communities, disabled people. And so it's going to make life harder for them in terms of, having to cross state lines and take time off of work and get childcare. And there's just so many barriers that go into it. And we just know that, it's largely folks of color that tend to be the most impacted by them.
And I was going to ask how this ruling specifically would affect people of color. We kind of answered that.
Yeah. So if you look at the states that are immediately going to ban abortion overnight, there's 13 13 states with what we call trigger laws, which means abortion is just going to become illegal literally right when this ruling comes out. So that's, when you look at those states, they're predominantly states in the South where more folks of color live. If you look at the Northeast, which, as we know, is predominantly white, those are not the states where abortion is going to get banned. In the Northeast, we're kind of an abortion safe haven. As you know, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont are the 3 whitest states in the country. So it's just a matter of looking at where specifically abortion's getting banned. I believe Texas has the most people of color, and that's where we saw the first ban. So that's why.
Wow. You said that abortion pills by mail are the future of abortion access. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. So as folks know, we had an ultrasound mandate as a law here in New Hampshire that just got overturned. So this wasn't an option for people across our state from January to just this June, but now it is. So when we say abortion pills by mail, what that means is right now there are 2 organizations operating in our state. They're called Aid Access and Abortion on Demand. And you can set up a telehealth appointment with providers, have an appointment with them, and then they will send you the medication to your door. So you never have to leave your house to have an abortion. That's a really great option for a lot of patients, particularly rural patients, patients who don't have access to a car. For some patients up north, the clinics might be 2 or 3 hours away from them. So I think it's the future of abortion, not because it's the best option for everyone. We want to make sure people both can go to clinics and get pills, but we think that we're going to see a huge increase in how many people are choosing that option just because of the convenience. It's a lot cheaper. You really don't have to do nearly as much. You don't have to take a whole day off work, for example, maybe just the day you actually have your abortion. But if you go to a clinic, you're going to have to possibly take multiple days off and have multiple appointments. So that's why we think it's the future. It's just because it's kind of the least barriers in terms of not having to travel and costing less.
So it makes it a lot more accessible to a lot more people.
Definitely.
I wanted to ask you that doing this type of work, I would assume anywhere in the United States is going to make you a target.
Yeah.
But can you talk about the state of doing abortion rights work specifically in New Hampshire and what your experience has been like there?
Yeah, I think I do hold a lot of privilege in terms of being a white person. I think that, that's the first thing I own up to doing this work is that my whiteness does carry a lot of privilege. But that doesn't mean I haven't faced certain attacks. I think something I've had to rise above is a lot of people equating me to being a murderer or, what have you. I've been called some pretty nasty things. But I have a really good sense of why I do this work. So I think I just have to not really let it bother me. And I think what kind of gets me through is knowing that 70% of people are on our side. So even if the other side is loud, I know that they are the minority. Even if the country decides to ban abortion, I still know that that is the minority opinion of this country. And yeah, I don't think we have it, nearly as bad as a lot of organizers in southern states who face, a lot more. And particularly the people who face it the most are providers themselves. We know clinics, often have to have a lot of increased security for their providers. So I think we've gotten lucky that we're not directly providing abortion. We're providing funding for abortion, which kind of gives me a layer of protection. But yeah, it's definitely gotten to me and felt hard at times.
I'm sure, but we appreciate the work that you do. I want to ask you really quick, do you have any additional resources that you'd like to share?
Yeah, we're on TikTok and we're trying to do more education through TikTok to kind of get through to like high school audiences and stuff. And we also just started another account called reprofund.ed on Instagram. And that's an entirely high school led account, just trying to do sex education for teens. So we're not just talking about abortion. We're also trying to talk about things like birth control access and, young people knowing their rights when it comes to accessing contraception and abortion and not just having their parents, but having us as a resource to ask questions and stuff. So that's something I'm really excited to grow as we, gain more support and momentum in our work.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being our guest today and for sharing your thoughts.
Of course.
Join us next time for another episode. For more information about our discussion today, check out our web story on nhlatinonynews.com. Follow us on Twitter at NHLatinoNews and Instagram at NH_Latino News. I'm Annabelle Rocha with New Hampshire Latino News Opinion Plus. See you next time.